There's a specific kind of silence that shows up at the end of days like this. The room isn't completely dark. Your phone screen is still on, casting that pale light over your hands. But everything feels strangely distant. You scroll without really meaning to. Story after story, post after post, the same faces you know, the same places you recognize. Sometimes it's a table at a restaurant you've been to. Sometimes it's a group selfie in a living room you've sat in before. Same people. Same rooms, just without you this time. Your chest doesn't explode with pain. It sinks a little. Not enough to call it a crisis, just enough to feel that small drop inside, that quiet, oh. Your thumb pauses on a video for a second too long, watching everyone laugh about something you weren't there to see. You tell yourself it's not a big deal. People hang out, plans happen. Not every invitation includes everyone. You know that. You've told yourself that more times than you can count. Still, there's this familiar, subtle heat in your face, even though no one can see you. A tiny wave of embarrassment for feeling hurt by something that, technically, nobody did wrong. You lock your phone. Then you unlock it again a few seconds later, almost on autopilot. You open the group chat. You scroll up, checking if you missed something. An invitation. Who's free tonight? Anything. The chat is quiet, or full of messages that don't explain why you only found out about tonight through a story after it already happened. You lie back, phone resting on your chest now, the screen still glowing. The ceiling is just a vague shape above you. Your eyes feel tired, not just from the day, but from this same feeling repeating itself in different ways. It's not that you were alone all day. Maybe you went to work, talked to people, answered messages. From the outside, your life doesn't look empty. But in moments like this, it hits you how often you feel like you're just slightly outside the frame of other people's real lives. You remember times when you found out about plans after they were already over. When someone said, "We should invite you next time," and you smiled like it didn't sting. When you saw pictures of a group you thought you were part of, and realized, quietly, that maybe you were more on the edge of it than you wanted to believe. The room is still. Maybe there's a faint sound from outside. A car passing, a neighbor's TV, some distant noise that doesn't really reach you. Inside, though, there's that same sentence you barely let yourself think out loud. Why am I always the one on the outside? You wouldn't text anyone that. It sounds too needy, too dramatic, too hard to explain. So instead, you just stay there, with the phone on your chest, feeling that small, sharp ache of being left out settle into something heavier and quieter. And even if you keep telling yourself it doesn't matter, some part of you knows it does. You probably know the exact moment when the feeling hits. It's not always dramatic. Sometimes it's as simple as one picture loading on your screen. You recognize the faces before you even read the caption. The same group you've sat with, laughed with, shared inside jokes with. They're squeezed together on a couch, or around a table, or standing somewhere you've also been before. Everyone looks close, comfortable, like they belong there. Your name doesn't show up anywhere, not in the tags, not in the comments, not in the "you guys were missed" replies, because nobody is saying that. You tell yourself it's nothing. You double-tap the post or react to the story just to prove, to them or to yourself you're not sure, that you're fine. Sometimes you even type something light, like, "looks fun," and hope your own words don't sound as small as they feel. Then there are the group chats. You open them more times than you admit. You scroll back to see when the plan started. Was there a message you didn't notice? Did they talk about it somewhere else? Did they assume you were busy? You look for evidence that there must be some reasonable explanation. Because the alternative, that they just didn't think of you, cuts a little too close. There are smaller moments, too. The off times when you're physically there, but still feel left out. You're sitting with people, listening to them talk about something that happened when you weren't around. An inside joke you don't get. A story that starts with, "Remember when we..." And you realize you weren't part of that "we." You laugh along anyway. You nod, smile, pretend you're following. You don't want to be the one who makes things weird by reminding everyone that you weren't there. It's easier to stay quiet and let the moment pass. Later, though, it sticks with you longer than it should. You replay the way they said, "We all went out last week," like all included everyone that mattered. You think about how no one seemed to notice that you weren't part of that memory, how nobody paused and said, "We should invite you next time." Unless it was as an afterthought. There's a specific sting that comes with always finding out about things after they happen. You see pictures of trips, dinners, random hangouts. You read comments full of, "I had the best time," and "We need to do this again." And even if you're genuinely happy they had fun, there's a part of you that quietly asks, "Why wasn't I there if I'm part of the group too?" Sometimes you try to bring it up in small ways. You say, "Oh, that looked fun," hoping they'll fill in the missing piece. Sometimes they do. "Yeah, it was super last minute. We just ended up going. We thought you might be busy." None of those sentences sound cruel, but they don't quite erase the feeling either. You start noticing patterns. You're the one who messages first more often. You're the one who asks, "What are you guys doing this weekend?" You're the one who suggests plans and gets vague answers, then sees everyone together later anyway. It's hard to explain how humiliating that can feel, even when no one is trying to humiliate you. Not the loud kind of humiliation. The quiet kind that makes you feel smaller inside your own life. Like you're always almost included, almost remembered, almost important. You begin to read yourself into every gap. A delayed reply becomes a sign. A "we should hang out sometime" that never turns into a real plan becomes another sign. "Oh, you should have come," said after the fact feels less like regret and more like a sentence thrown in to soften your place on the outside. And somewhere underneath all of this, there's a belief you barely say out loud. If I were really important to them, I wouldn't have to wonder if I'm included. You might even feel embarrassed about how much this gets to you. You tell yourself that adults shouldn't care this much about not being invited, that you should be independent enough to not feel this sting. So you push it down, call yourself dramatic, and try to move on. But the feeling doesn't disappear just because you scold yourself for having it. It waits for the next time you see everyone together without you. The next time you hear "all of us" and realize, again, you weren't part of that all. The next time you go to bed with the quiet awareness that, once again, you were on the outside of someone else's real life. And after enough of those nights, it stops feeling like isolated coincidences. It starts feeling like a pattern, a story about who you are. The person who is close enough to be around, but not close enough to be thought of first. It can feel like this just is who you are. The person who always ends up on the outside. But usually, this feeling didn't start as an identity. It started as a series of small lessons your mind and nervous system picked up along the way. At some point, being left out wasn't just an occasional inconvenience. It felt personal. Maybe it was the birthday party everyone talked about at school that you weren't invited to. Maybe it was the friend group that slowly formed around you, but not really with you. Maybe it was realizing that you only heard about important news in your family after everyone else already knew. Those moments might not have looked huge from the outside. Adults might have said things like, "It's not a big deal," or "You'll be invited next time," or "Don't take it so personally." But your body noticed. Your chest tightened. Your stomach sank. You felt that burning mix of embarrassment and sadness that comes when you realize other people were together and you weren't part of it. When something like that happens enough times, you don't just remember the events. You start to form conclusions about yourself. Not consciously, in a neat sentence. More like a quiet background belief. I'm not someone people think of first. So now, when you see a photo of people hanging out without you, your mind doesn't see a random hangout. It sees confirmation. Of course they forgot me. Of course they didn't think of inviting me. Of course I found out after. It's like your brain has built a filter. Anything that looks like being left out passes through it and comes out the other side as proof that you're unimportant. Even neutral situations, last-minute plans, miscommunications, people being distracted, can feel like they're all saying the same thing about you. There's another layer, too. When you've felt left out enough times, you start trying to protect yourself from the next time before it even happens. You lower your expectations. You tell yourself not to get your hopes up about being invited. You convince yourself you don't really want to go anyway. It sounds like self-control, but a lot of the time it's self-protection. It feels safer to assume you won't be chosen than to hope you will, and feel that sting again. So you pretend you don't mind. You act unbothered. You say things like, "I'm more of a homebody," or "I like being alone," even when part of you is quietly starving for connection. The problem is that this protective strategy can make the whole thing worse. Because when you start acting like you don't care, some people believe you. They stop asking because they don't want to pressure you. They assume you're the one who prefers to stay out of it. And to you, that just looks like more proof that you were never really wanted there in the first place. Underneath the anger and hurt, there is often a deep sense of shame. Not just, "They didn't invite me," but "They didn't invite me because there's something about me that people don't naturally choose." You might not say it out loud, but it lingers in the way you hesitate before texting someone first. In the way you overthink whether you're being annoying. In the way you hold yourself back from asking, "Why didn't you tell me?" Because you're afraid of hearing the answer. So when you're lying there at night, staring at your phone and feeling that familiar ache, it's not only about what happened today. Today just touched something older. It pressed on a bruise you've been carrying for a long time, the one that whispers that you're always the extra, the afterthought, the one who gets added on if there's space, not the one people build plans around. It makes sense that it hurts this much. You're not just looking at a story or a photo. You're looking at a pattern your mind has been trying to understand for years. And every time it seems to repeat, it feels less like an unfortunate situation and more like a verdict about your place in other people's lives. Maybe that verdict was never actually spoken. No one sat you down and said, "You're not important." But sometimes, the most painful beliefs are the ones nobody has to say for you to still feel them. There's a strange split inside you when it comes to being included. On one side, there's this very simple wish. You just want to be thought of. You want to be in the photo, not just the person who sees it later. On the other side, there's a part of you that has learned to act like none of this really matters. You say things like, "I prefer smaller plans anyway," or "I'm not really a going out person." Sometimes that's true. Sometimes you really do need the quiet. But other times, it's a way of protecting yourself from how much it hurts to feel like the last name on everyone's list, or not on it at all. You feel the sting when you see everyone together without you. But if someone asks, you shrug and say, "It's fine, I needed a night in." You feel a small crack in your chest when you realize you weren't invited. but you react with a haha or a heart emoji because you don't want anyone to see that crack. It's confusing, even for you. You want to be included so badly that it aches. And at the same time, you hate the idea of being seen as desperate for connection. So you live in this in-between space where you hope people will fight to include you, but you also work hard to look like you don't need anyone. Sometimes you even turn down invitations, not because you don't want to go, but because something about the timing or the way it was offered makes you feel like an afterthought. You tell yourself, if they really wanted me there, they would have asked earlier, and staying home feels safer than showing up and feeling like the extra chair at the table. Then, later, you see photos of the event you said no to, and the same old feeling comes back. You feel left out of something you technically chose not to attend. And that's its own kind of pain. Being hurt both when you're not invited and when you are, but don't feel fully wanted. There's another conflict, too. You want people to see how much you care, but you're afraid of being too much. So you hold back. You delay replying so you don't look too eager. You don't send the second message when they don't answer the first. You pretend you're equally busy, equally detached, equally fine. But beneath that performance, you're still checking if they've seen your message. You're still hoping they'll be the one to say, "We missed you," or "We should plan something, just us." You're still waiting for someone to show, through their actions, that you're not just a convenient option. The more this keeps happening, the more you start to feel like you don't fit in either role. You're not the person who genuinely doesn't care about being invited. But você também não é a pessoa que se sente confortável admitindo o quanto isso importa. So you get stuck somewhere in the middle, quietly hurting but trying to look above it. When you do gather the courage to be a little more honest, maybe you say, "I wish I'd known you guys were going," or "I felt a bit left out." There's often another fear waiting underneath. What if they think you're overreacting? What if they see you as clingy, needy, difficult? What if sharing your hurt just gives them more proof that you're not someone they want to invite next time? So most of the time, you keep it to yourself. You process everything alone, usually in the quiet of your room, with your phone screen still open in your hand. You carry both sides of the conflict. The part of you that longs to be chosen, and the part that insists you should be okay with not being chosen. It's a heavy place to live in. You end up feeling left out not only from events and plans, but sometimes from your own emotional truth. You abandon yourself a little bit every time you tell yourself it doesn't hurt when it actually does. And maybe that's the hardest part. That feeling of standing outside the window of other people's lives is painful enough. But standing outside your own feelings, pretending they don't matter, can make the loneliness feel even deeper. It's late again. Not late in the dramatic sense. Just that quiet hour where you notice how loud your own thoughts get when everything else finally slows down. The light in the room is soft, maybe just a lamp in the corner or the glow from the hallway. Your phone is still in your hand, even though you've already seen everything there is to see tonight. Same faces, same places, same feeling. You scroll back up through the stories, almost as if the second or third time might change something. It doesn't. They're still there, laughing on that couch, clinking glasses at that table, squeezed into the frame at that concert. You're still here, watching it all from a distance of a few inches and a whole different reality. Your body knows this ritual now. The slight heaviness in your chest. The way your stomach dips a little when you see a new post from people you're close to, but not close enough to have been there. You shift your position on the bed or the sofa, trying to find a spot where your thoughts feel less sharp, but they follow you. there's a part of you that wants to zoom in on the photo just to see who exactly was there. You tell yourself it's stupid, then zoom in anyway. You count faces, even though you don't call it that. You notice who's next to whom. You wonder how the night even started. Who messaged first, where the plans were made. You imagine small details that you'll never actually know. How someone probably said, "Let's do something tonight." How names were mentioned. How yours maybe didn't come up, or came up too late, or came up with a shrug. None of this is written anywhere. It's all in your head. But your head has been collecting small pieces of this feeling for years, and it doesn't need much to build a whole story now. You lock the phone again. The room instantly feels darker. For a second, there's relief in that. No more images, no more proof, just silence. But silence has its own way of making space for thoughts you've been holding back. You stare at the ceiling, or the shadow of something on the wall, and feel that familiar, wordless ache settle in. You're not crying. You're not breaking down. You're just tired. Tired of replaying the same emotional pattern. Maybe your mind wanders to other times this happened. The group trip you heard about only when people posted pictures from the airport. The dinner you found out about because someone accidentally mentioned, "Last time we all went out," and you realized all didn't include you. The event where you were invited, but somehow still felt like the person no one would notice if they left early. You feel your jaw unclench a little as you exhale. Your body starts to realize the day is over, even if your thoughts haven't caught up yet. There's a quiet heaviness in your limbs that isn't just physical. It's the weight of carrying the same question night after night. Why does it so often feel like everyone else is inside something I'm just looking at from the outside? You pick up your phone again, almost by reflex. Not because you expect a new message, but because you don't quite know what to do with your hands when you feel like this. You open an app, close it, open another. For a moment, you forget what you were even looking for. It's strangely easy to feel both silly and deeply hurt at the same time. Silly for caring this much about plans and posts. Hurt because, deep down, it isn't just about tonight's plans or today's posts. It's about the quiet pattern they keep fitting into. Somewhere between one breath and the next, you notice how normal this has become for you. How familiar this exact posture is. Lying there, tired eyes, phone resting next to you, replaying things you'll never actually talk about. This is the part of the day where you meet the version of yourself that most people never really see. The one who cares more than they let on, who notices more than they admit, who carries more than they ever say. You might not have words for all of it. You might not even know how you would begin to explain it to someone. So you do what you usually do. You let the feeling sit there beside you, hoping it gets a little quieter before you fall asleep. When this keeps happening, it's almost automatic to turn everything against yourself. If they didn't invite me, it must mean I'm boring, forgettable, not really anyone's first choice. On some level, that explanation feels strangely tidy. You're the one constant in all these situations, so your mind picks the simplest story. If I'm always on the outside, there must be something wrong with me. But what if that's not the only way to read it? Not necessarily the truest way, just the one shame reaches for the fastest. A lot of people move through their lives half distracted. They make plans quickly, message whoever is already on their screen, assume someone else probably told you, or forget to loop everyone in. Not because they've decided you don't matter, but because they're busy, overwhelmed, or simply used to thinking in very small circles. That doesn't erase the sting when you're not included. It doesn't make the ache any less real. But it does mean they didn't invite me, isn't always the same as, I mean nothing to them. Sometimes people are genuinely careless with the people they care about. Sometimes they underestimate how much it hurts to be left out. Sometimes you look so fine on the outside that they assume this wouldn't bother you. And sometimes, the spaces you move through were never really designed for someone like you. Rooms where light conversation is enough. Circles where no one pays much attention to who is missing. Places where being thoughtful isn't a shared language. If you're someone who notices details, who feels deeply, who reads being remembered as a sign of love, of course this hits differently. You're not too sensitive for wanting to be considered. You're just acutely aware of the exact points where you're not. Maybe your way of measuring closeness is different from the people around you. For you, being close means being thought of before the photo, not only after it's posted. It means being in the group where plans are made, not just in the chat where they're summarized. When that doesn't happen, your mind doesn't file it away as bad timing. It quietly translates it into, I wasn't part of what really mattered. And that's not a small thing. Still, the conclusion doesn't have to be, so I must be the problem. There's a gentler possibility. I care a lot about being considered, and I've spent a long time around people or dynamics that didn't reflect that care back to me. That doesn't magically fix tonight. The posts are still there. The plans still happened without you. The familiar heaviness is still sitting in your chest. But maybe the target of your blame can shift just a little. Instead of directing all of it inward as proof that you're defective, you can start to see this pain as the normal reaction of someone for whom belonging really matters. You're not asking for something ridiculous when you wish someone had thought of you. You're not being dramatic for wanting to be included without having to beg or push your way in. You're asking for something deeply human, to exist in other people's minds even when you're not in the room. Maybe that hasn't happened often enough yet. Maybe the people who could meet you there aren't in your life right now. That would explain why each new moment of being left out feels so sharp. It's not just about tonight. It's about every time this need went unnoticed before. The fact that it hurts this much doesn't mean you're fragile in the wrong way. It means there is something in you that still believes being chosen matters. And that belief, no matter how bruised, is not something you need to be ashamed of. Maybe tonight, nothing dramatic changes. No last-minute text arrives explaining everything. No sudden invitation appears that makes the whole day feel different. The photos are still there. The stories are still there. The feeling of having been on the outside is still there too. On the surface, it looks like just another night you go to bed with a slightly heavier chest. Another night where your phone ends up beside you, screen face down, while your mind keeps replaying moments you were never actually in. But on the inside, something small might already be shifting. For a long time, the only story you had was, if I'm always left out, there must be something wrong with me. If that's the only explanation available, of course your body feels this tired. Of course your jaw clenches when you see everyone together. Of course your stomach drops when you realize you weren't even a consideration. What if, just for tonight, you didn't have to fix that feeling? You didn't have to design a new version of yourself. You didn't have to promise that you'll become more interesting, more fun, more whatever. What if it was enough to simply allow this thought? Of course this hurts. I've spent a long time wanting to matter in rooms where I often felt like an extra. There's a quiet relief that appears when you stop attacking yourself for caring. When you stop calling your longing neediness. When you stop treating your wish to be included as something embarrassing. You're allowed to be someone who wants to be thought of. You're allowed to want to be in the message thread where plans are made, not just in the one where they're recapped. You're allowed to want more than being the person who hears about things after they're already over. Maybe you haven't had much of that yet. Maybe most of your life has been spent in spaces where your name wasn't the first one people reached for. That would explain why each new moment of being left out feels bigger than the situation itself. It's pressing on every other time this happened, not just tonight. But that accumulation doesn't mean you're broken. It just means you've been paying attention. You've noticed every time you weren't considered, and you kept going anyway. You don't have to wake up tomorrow as someone who suddenly doesn't care about being invited. You don't have to pretend that you're above all of this. Moving on doesn't have to mean numbing out. Maybe the first shift is gentler than that. The next time you feel that familiar ache when you see everyone together without you, you could try a different sentence. Not, "What's wrong with me?" but, "It makes sense that this hurts because belonging matters to me." It won't make the sting disappear. The loneliness might still sit beside you while you scroll. There will still be nights where you feel like you're watching other people live from just outside the frame. But slowly, the person you're blaming for all of it might change. Instead of pointing everything at yourself, you might start to see the bigger picture. The environments that weren't careful, the people who never really learned how to include, the history of being almost in, almost chosen, almost there. None of that makes you defective. It just means your heart has been asking for something it hasn't received consistently yet. Tonight, you might still fall asleep with a lump in your throat. You might still feel the echo of all the times you wished someone had said, "We wanted you there." That's okay. Feelings don't become less real just because we understand them better. But maybe, as you lie there in the half-dark, tired eyes, heavy shoulders, phone finally quiet, you can let one more truth sit next to the hurt. You are not strange for wanting to be included. You are not weak for caring when you're left out. You are simply someone who knows, very clearly, that it matters to have a place where you're not always standing just outside the door. And even if that place still feels far away, you don't have to carry the conclusion that "I am the problem" to get through tonight. For now, it might be enough that this pain makes sense, and that you don't have to be ashamed of feeling it.